We haven't seen many pure action games like Darksiders 3 in the past decade or so. It's not as visually impressive as other recent games, and its design philosophy doesn't coddle you. It's a third-person action game that isn't afraid to grind your progress to a halt for an hour or more until you figure out how to beat a seemingly impossible boss. But the combat is satisfying, and, maybe not every game needs to be a giant open world with a million things to collect and a never-ending supply of side quests. Your appreciation of the characters and stakes of this roughly 20-hour story will get a boost if you've played at least the first Darksiders. Each game puts you in control of a different horseman of the apocalypse in a unique and interesting setting, a ravaged Earth where a war between angels and demons has pretty much left humans extinct. Your horseman this time around is Fury, but her debut isn't especially memorable. Her cheesy dialogue and bland voice acting don't do much to punch up the paint-by-numbers task of hunting down and battling the 7 deadly sins. As for the graphics, while there have been games this year that have truly stunned me with their beauty, Darksiders 3 is not one of them. The stylized, cartoonish characters are plopped into a pretty generic-looking world that lacks detail. It's in the hacking and slashing that Darksiders 3 really excels. This is no mindless beat-em-up. Every enemy needs to be studied until you've written a compendium in your mind of all the various beasts and their subtle tells and attack patterns. Putting in the effort and dominating your enemy is the most satisfying part. Fury's ever-expanding arsenal includes lots of fun toys, and it's up to you to decide which ones to power up and rely most on. In my case, that was the Chains of Scorn, because they set my enemies on fire. Along with her weapons, Fury gains new movement powers that give her access to new areas. Once you've unlocked them all, it's fun to switch between all her different forms to find the right tools for the various combat jobs and obstacles. One annoying thing is that no matter how powerful Fury becomes, basic enemies can still kill her with just a few hits at any point. Level scaling is not a design choice I appreciate. It's much better to feel like an all-powerful god after putting in all that time and effort. The bosses in Darksiders 3 are not messing around. While the first couple might not pose much of a threat, they're all highly varied tests of both combat skill and environmental puzzling. Eventually, you'll encounter one that doesn't seem to respond to any trick or attack you've learned up to that point, and they're not above cheating. It can be frustrating to suddenly have the tables turned on you, to be sure, but with persistence, satisfying success eventually comes. Boss checkpoints could have been tweaked though. In one case, losing to a boss sends you all the way back to a checkpoint with all sorts of enemies blocking your path back to round 2. In another, you have to spend a few minutes running back to the boss with no enemies to fight. The bosses here are tough enough that these inconveniences add up after a few failures. Instead of open world, I describe Darksiders 3 as a connected world game. It's a series of smallish rooms connected by hallways and tunnels, and the nearest deadly sin is always marked with a skull on your radar at the top of the screen. So, playing Darksiders 3 means running down hallways from room to room, keeping that skull centered, and fighting any monsters in your way. That's 90% of it, with environmental puzzles making up the remaining 10%. These are a nice break from the action, and one or two were tough enough to stump me for more than a few minutes. That doesn't leave much room for rewarding exploration, but I did enjoy hunting down the upgrade items that are hidden all over the place behind corners and just off the beaten path. The straightforward simplicity of Darksiders 3 is a refreshing change of pace after exploring so many dense open-world games. That simplicity doesn't refer to the combat or boss battles though, as they are complex and almost startlingly unforgiving. Its throwback philosophy is comfort food for action gamers of a certain age, but it would have been nice to see the third game in the series introduce some new concepts to relaunch Darksiders in the modern age. For more on Darksiders 3, check out 16 minutes of gameplay and our list of the series' best bosses. And for everything else, stick with us right here at IGN.